Today's lesson is about solving square and cube root equations. So we did spend a little bit of time yesterday talking about simplifying a square root equation. We are going to bump that up now and also talk about cube root equations. So anytime we are looking at any sort of root, really what we're looking at is a fractional exponent. So when you have something that is underneath the square root, essentially, that's saying x to the 1/2 power. Then if we think about the cubed root, so we're taking something and breaking it down, saying what multiplied by itself 3 times gives me that number. So if it's to the cubed root, that would be to the 1/3 power. If it was the 4th root of something, it'd be to the 1/4 power. So anytime you're looking at putting something under a radical, you are breaking it down into a fractional exponent. So if I take a look at this one, so for example 1, 324 to the 1/2 power, this is the same thing as saying what is the square root of 324. And if you were to plug that into your calculator and break that down, you would get that answer would be 18. If I think about 1000 to the 1/3 power, that's also looking at what the cubed root of 1000 is. So that's asking what multiplied by itself 3 times gives me 1000. You can also plug this into your calculator, but if you break that down, that answer would be 10. So 10 times itself 3 times gives me 1000. Now, if I look at this next one and I see negative 144 to the 1/2 power, if I put that underneath the square root, I have negative 144 underneath that square root. We've done something like this before where if you take that negative out, it comes out as an I. And then we break down the square root of 144 and we get 12. So this would be 12i as my answer. And then lastly, when I look here, the cubed root of negative 27, that actually is a real number. Because if you multiply a negative by itself 3 times, it's still going to be negative. So if I break this down and plug that in, I would get negative 3 as a result. All right, so let's go through some examples and see what we can get here. Just scroll this down a little bit. Okay, so let's try this first one. So my first step is I want to get everything on one side that isn't underneath that square root or isn't underneath that 1/2 power. If it helps you, I might try to write this like this. Okay, so the square root of x over 3 minus 4 equals 5. So let's add that 4 to both sides. And now I see the square root of x over 3 equals 9. So my next step then is going to be to square both sides. That's the only way I'm going to be able to get rid of that square root. So let's square both sides. And when I do that, I'm left with what I had underneath the radical. So that was x over 3. And then I had 9 squared gives me 81. And then to get x by itself, I will multiply both sides by 3. That eliminates the 3's over on the left-hand side. I get x equals, and then 81 times 3 gives me 243. And let's just do a quick check of that solution. Okay, well, let's just plug it in. All right, so I see where x was, I'll put the 243. And then I have that over 3. That was to the 1/2 power. Minus 4, does that equal 5? Okay, well, 24 over 3 gives me 81. We know the square root of 81 gives me 9. Does 9 minus 4 give me 5? Yes, it does. So that does check out. All right, let's go over to example 3. Okay, so what I want to do now is get what I have underneath the square root by itself. So first thing I'll do is add x to both sides. So I have 3x plus 18 to the 1/2 power equals x. And now I'm going to square both sides. That square root was by itself, so I'll square both sides. All I'm left with now on the left-hand side is just 3x plus 18. if you look at the exponents here, when we have a power to a power, we are multiplying. So 2 times 1/2 does give me 1, which is why when you square something that's underneath the square root, the radical goes away. And this is equal to x squared over here. Now let's get everything on one side, because I do see the x squared and I do see the x. We are going to have to do some factoring. So now I have 0 equals x squared minus 3x minus 8. And what two numbers are multiplied? Oh, sorry, that is an 18. Silly me. Okay, so what two numbers multiply to a negative 18 and add to a negative 3? Well, that would be negative 6 and a positive 3. So now I'll check, I'll set both of those equal to 0. So I get x equals 6 and x equals negative 3. And let's just do a quick check of these. Okay, so if I plug in my value of 6, let's see what we get. So we get the square root of 3 times 6 is 18 plus 18 minus 6. Does that equal 0? So 18 plus 18 gives me 36. Okay, so the square root of 36 is 6. So I have 6 minus 6 equals 0. 0 equals 0. Okay, so the 6 definitely works out. That's great. I'm going to erase what I have, and let's just try it with the negative 3. Let's give it a shot here. Okay, so let's give it a shot. So I have the square root of 3 times negative 3 plus 18, and then minus 6. Does that give me 0? So 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Plus 18 minus 6, does it equal 0? Negative 9 plus 18 gives me 9. The square root of 9 is 3. Okay. Oh my goodness. I'm making silly mistakes. When we plug in the x, that gives me a negative 3. So when you plug in a negative number there, that becomes plus 3, plus 3, plus 3. This does not give me a true statement. So 3 plus 3 does not give me 0. 3 plus 3 gives me 6. So x equal to negative 3 does not work out. I'm sorry for those silly mistakes there. All right, and then let's do this last one together. So if I see something that is to the 1/3 power, I see that that radical is by itself. So that saves us one step. Now to get that exponent to become 1, that is when we cube both sides. So these exponents here, when I multiply them, will cancel out. They'll become 1, so I'm just left with x plus 5 equals 4 cubed gives me 64. And then this one's actually a pretty nice one. I'll just go through and get x by itself. And then 64 minus 5 gives me 59. Let's just do a quick check. Okay, so I have 59 plus 5 to the 1/3 power. Does that equal 4? 59 plus 5 gives me 64. If you take the cubed root of 64, you do get 4. So that one does check out.